Okay, Pontius, would you like to take item 7, please?
Right. Thank you, members and Chair. Item 7 is about the purpose is to seek members' agreement for a revised Statement of Community Involvement and a revised LDP timetable, so that both documents can be brought forward to DFI for their formal approval, and subsequently that they will be advertised and published in line with the legal requirements. Members, firstly, it will take you through the SCI and then the timetable. The SCI, the Statement of Community Involvement, it explains how the community and stakeholders will be involved in the council's plan-making processes. Planning processes, i.e. in both development management, its planning applications, and also in the preparation of our LDP. So it's for both sides of the house. There are regulations governing the SCA. There are also 2 development plan and management practice notes on the SCA, and the council is required to prepare an SCA and to keep it under review. That's the requirement. In particular for LDP, it is important because it is one of the soundness tests for an LDP, and we will have to demonstrate as part of our submission how we have taken account and complied with the Council's Statement of Community Involvement. Just to remind members that the first Statement of Community Involvement was prepared in July 2016. It was at the time of the launch of the LDP, and it was the formal start along with its timetable. And at that stage also, the new council was getting stuck into its development management responsibilities. A revised SCI was published then in May 2018, and that was primarily to reflect changes that had been made in terms of consultation for an EU Improve project for both LDP and development management. The second revision of the SCA, there's a copy of the draft included for members at Appendix 3. The main changes for the SCA at this stage are to reflect the recent temporary arrangements for the public to view documents when the council's offices are closed, and that would apply to both planning applications, planning files, and also to LDP documents. So it includes and covers that for any times in the past, currently, or if they happen in the future, that the council would be enabled to have a more flexible approach to display and make available documents, rather than just the previous rigid requirement to come into the council offices. Secondly, and I suppose the most immediate requirement, it's to advise the public about the forthcoming additional consultation stage for the proposed changes to the LDP. That stage isn't currently in the legislation or in the current SCA. So if we are to go out next month and have another consultation with the public on proposed changes, then we have to firstly get it cleared through and included in the Statement of Community Involvement. Members, in the paper there in part 3.1, I have set out in yellow the main changes that are in the SCA, but those are the 2 of the most substantive ones there, to do with the display and making available of documents, and also the forthcoming consultation stage. If members are happy with these changes, it will then be up to us to get DFI approval, and then we would advertise this new SCA, and with the immediate effect would be that we can proceed to advertise and consult on the proposed changes. That's the SCA. Now, members, for the LDP timetable, We have also proposed a revised LDP timetable. The LDP timetable, to jog members' memory, it, I suppose, does what it says in the tin. It sets out the Council's programme and timetable for the production of the LDP plan strategy and then the LDP local policies plan. It includes the key milestones and time scales right from the start of the plan right up to publication of the draft, consultation, and then up to independent examination, and then the adoption of each of the two documents. The Planning Act requires the Council to prepare the timetable and to keep it under review. Again, it's mentioned specifically in the Planning Act, and also there are timetable regulations, the Local Development Plan regulations, a section on it, and there is an LDP Development Plan practice note as well. Again, like the SCA, it is one of the requirements for soundness, and the Council needs to demonstrate how we have met the timetable and complied with the timetable as revised in our preparation of our LDP. So it very much is a public statement of the timescales that this Council is hoping to achieve, and alerting members of the public and any interested parties, agents, etc., when they can expect to be consulted. To recap, the first LDP timetable was published in July 2016. And at that stage, we were starting out on the LDP preparation process, heading towards POP, the preferred options paper. Learning from the experiences and the time that it practically took for consultation, in particular for the preferred options paper, the Council published a revised LDP timetable in May 2018. Looking ahead to the next stage, a further revised LDP timetable was published in July 2019, and that was just before the big document, the draft plan strategy, was ready to issue. So that then issued, the LDP draft plan strategy was published in December 2019. It was followed with consultation, and then I suppose the big issue was that the COVID pandemic struck, and offices closed and disrupted the consultation process. So that was the primary reason that the timetable slipped. But the plan has taken a considerable amount of time to prepare. So members, officers have drafted a new and revised LDP timetable. In particular, it sets out the anticipated timescales and pathway for the upcoming stage from LDP submission to the independent examination, and then onwards towards adoption of the draft plan strategy. Members, at Appendix 4, a draft of the revised LDP timetable is set before members. The primary change is on the final page at Appendix 1 of that document. The table summarises the main stages of LDP preparation and allocates a best estimate to the dates of those key milestones. Obviously, the near future stages, they're more predictable and more within the Council's control. So, members, on that final page of the draft timetable, we set out that we anticipate to get approval for the proposed changes, as well as the timetable itself, in September, both at this special committee and then full Council. The next stage would be to advertise the proposed changes for the statutory 8 weeks. Following that, we would expect to submit in December or early January to formally submit the draft plan strategy and the changes, together with any comments, to DFA. DFA have stated that they would expect to take about 6 to 8 weeks for that, so 2 months. So that would take us into March. So all being well, they will then submit it to the PAC, and the PAC have indicated that they will take and consider the documents for 5 months firstly, and then they will cause an independent examination. So members, with this timetable here, we are anticipating that the plan strategy independent examination at approximately October to December next year. Obviously, after that, it's a bit more out of the control of the council. But if the PAC meet their indicated timescales of taking 5 months to prepare their report, and then DFA to take about 2 months to consider it before they issue to the council their binding instruction. So members, that's how we've set out going ahead, how we would see that the draft plan strategy firstly, and then the local policies plan would go through adoption and preparation of the local policies plan to its adoption, and the timescales that we would expect to try and achieve. As I say, obviously, the further on 2+ years down the line, there's more aspects out of our control, but the officers and the council are very committed to doing it as fast as we can. So it's as soon as possible, bearing in mind the constraints of the new system. And that's the indicative timetable that we are proposing, suggesting to members. Therefore, if members agree with this timetable, the next stage would go through full council. It has to be ratified by full council. We will seek DFA approval, and then it would be advertised and implemented thereafter. So I'm happy to take any questions on either the SCA or the timetable, members. The recommendation is that we would forward both of these revised documents to DFA and publish and advertise them and implement them with immediate effect thereafter. Thank you, members.
Members, have any questions for Pontius? Councillor Jackson?
Chair, I don't have a question. Does anybody else has questions? No. Chair, just over the last 18 months, I suppose we've been in the midst of a pandemic, and that's had a massive impact on the progression of our local development plan. Not only in terms of practical steps of us going through the development plan, but also the community involvement as well. So we believe that the changes, the statement of community involvement, and the changes to the time frame are both they're necessities coming on the back of these are very exceptional times. So I'm happy to propose that we accept the changes, the necessary changes to both the statement of community involvement and the timetable of delivery for the development plan. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. We also have Councillor Mooney seconding it.
Happy to second that proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Do we have any objectors? Sorry. Anybody voting against it? I take it that's unanimous now. Thank you. Just could you move on to item 8, please?
Again, thank you, Chair and members. I'm sorry you're tired listening to me at this stage. But promise John and Johnny will be coming in next. Members, item 8 before you today is to provide a brief update on the recent progress with the preparation of the LDP, and particularly this upcoming stage of formal submission of this LDP draft plan strategy, together with any proposed changes. So that is the next step: formal submission to DFA and hence to PAC, and then for the independent examination. So today in this paper, members will be asked to consider and agree to the draft proposed changes report. And if members agree to that, it can then be advertised and consulted upon with immediate effect. It's proposed to do that in, as I've said previously, from October to December. Then, in accordance with DPPN 10, the Development Plan Practice Note, on this stage of the plan, it would be consulted upon, and immediately after that consultation, the draft plan strategy and all those supporting documents would be submitted to DFA. So members, I'll take you through a bit more detail of this proposed changes report. We'll have some discussion on it. There's a draft of the proposed changes consultation report, which includes the table of, or a schedule of all the proposed changes. That's in Appendix 5 of the document, members. In terms of background, members will recall that the previous update to the Planning Committee was on the 12th of April, when we gave an update on the position of the LDP programme, and we look forward to the next stages. In particular, the counter representations period had closed at the end of January 2021, and we held a meeting of the LDP steering group at the start of March 2021, and we had discussed the forthcoming programme of how officers and members would give proper formal consideration to all the issues raised in the representations and counter representations. Members, in particular, you will recall that we held a series of 8 roundtable discussions going across all the major topics in the LDP draft plan strategy. And those meetings went on. They were for all members, but particularly for the Planning Committee members. And we ran for them from April through till July, a fairly intensive programme of discussion and consideration of all the representations. We had received, I think, about 250 representations and counter representations, but within them, there were a very considerable number of separate issues which all had to be considered. So officers and members put a lot of time and effort and serious consideration to how exactly we would react and respond to the representations that have been received. So the details, members, are set out in the paper there, 2/4 of all the, jog your memories of all the roundtable discussions and what we discussed at them, and mostly agreed. So the main issues have all been discussed with members at those RTDs, and the comments have now been incorporated in preparing the proposed changes report, which is at the Appendix 5 and that we will discuss below. To set the context, members, for these proposed changes, the Department of Infrastructure Strategic Planning have produced DPPN 10, the Development Plan Practice Note, and the Council is required to take account of it. That means that we should bear it in mind, take account of it, and I suppose only divert from it, really, if there are good reasons and justifiable reasons why we can do something different. But the expectation would be that the Council would take account and have regard to this Development Plan Practice Note. DPPN 10 does set out the opportunity for the Council to consider the representations and to make proposed changes. We can propose changes that we believe would be justifiable and make sense to the draft plan strategy, which was published and consulted upon over the past 18 months or so. So that's where it sets out that provision and gives flesh to that requirement. However, members should note that any proposed changes would be submitted to the PAC, and they would be saying to the PAC, yeah, the council would be happy to make these proposed changes to the draft plan strategy. So it's up to the PAC and eventually DFA to say whether they agree to the draft plan strategy and the proposed changes and say that, yeah, that's a sound LDP with or without those changes. So these are proposed changes by the council. So it's an important note on that. DPPN 10 specifies two sorts of proposed changes that you can make. Two main.
Could you just hold it there, please, 1 second? Go ahead.
Chair, after a couple of years, are we diverting back now from what was supposed to be our local development plan to a DFA-led development plan once again? These discussions have been going on now for a number of years. A lot of work has went done. We have justified every step of the way that DFA stepped away. It was a council-led plan. We consulted with the community, and now I see stuff creeping up here in relation to houses, rural housing, green belts, Strabane, say town centres and different things. And Chair, this is not what this is about. You know, the goalposts are changing. We have had this debate long and hard way back in the early days, and now it seems to be that DFA is coming in the end of it and telling us this is the way it's going to be, like it or lump it. And I'm not one bit happy with this, Chair. This is not what we set out for. This is not what we set in rooms and hotel rooms and different places, trying to get a development plan for this area. And now we see now that it's DFA is taking it and swinging the lead here. I'm not happy with it at all, Chair.
Thank you for your comments, and as you said, you've been working on it many years before my time as well, and I would tend to agree with her to some extent. There, the DFI seem to be sticking their nose in, basically, to put it politely, whereas it's supposed to be down to the local councils and local area to decide what their future was. I wonder would any of the panels maybe want to comment on this?
Just to say that I think what Prentice was outlining was an advice note regarding the process of the plan LDP. I don't know, maybe you're discussing maybe the paper that's we're going to deal with on Thursday, but we can discuss it here today as well if members wish. In terms of the rural policy, the plan that I think Prentice was referring to is related simply to providing clarification in the process of an LDP, so that when we get to an independent examination, that the steps and procedures that we've taken have been correct, not about the content. So it's just to clarify that. And that's not what this paper is about. Obviously, this paper is about our focus changes and the minor the minor changes, focus changes, and how we've gone about it. So all that I suppose Prentice is saying is that we're content the way we're going about it is actually covered in this process, and that we're following due process. So there's no concern. Officers are recommending that that's not a problem. Because if we were, we would have obviously highlighted that to yourselves in the paper. So we're just to reassure members that there's no issue about what's in the content of that advice note. You're quite right. Heads of planning did ask for advice notes and guidance in terms of the process away at the beginning. And in due course, we've been getting bits and pieces in regards to the development plan process over a period of time. And for some, it's past the post. We've already moved on to other stages. So in regards to that point, in terms of the timeliness of it, I would agree, but it's just important that I point out that we have looked at that document and we know that we, you know, as just to reassure members, we have followed the procedures. This is a procedural point, but more than happy. I mean, obviously we prepared a paper for members regarding particularly the rural housing advice note that DFI published recently, and that was within the papers that unfortunately we haven't got to yet, that we will hopefully get to on Thursday. But as I say, Prentious and the team are more than happy to come in on that. But if you want, Councillor Maguire, I can give advice on that as well. No, it's up to yourselves.
Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Chair. And just following from the previous councillor stuff, and it has been going a long time. And you know what we were told, and we were engaging around, you know, the plan was going to be local, going to be driven by local needs. It's going to be flexible, and some stuff in there, and the plan will be allowed to be matured, and it's going to be driven through local need. And I understand Laura saying about the process, and we're following the process, but it seems to be, you know, I understand what the country's saying, it's about our local ownership, and a lot of it seems to be straying away now to the government departments, and we've had, through this process, we've had numerous arguments around the rationale that we were putting up, and our arguments, and our interpretation, and very much our subjectiveness. And now it's tend to, through this process, it's getting taken away from us, and it's getting further removed, and the government departments going to decide. Like we're talking now, we're going to go out consultation for the next 8 weeks, and we're going to go local, and we're going to do community statements and all the rest. How much ownership will local have over any changes to this LDP compared to what government is demanding? We do. That's where I seem to think we might lose local ownership through the process that's getting outlined.
I just want to go back and just reassure again, you know, I think there's just been maybe a lot of focus on that advice note simply because it came out, the process hasn't changed. There's nothing in this advice note that's different to what we had envisaged as part of the process from the beginning. All that it is an advice note, and I'm just reassuring members that having looked at the new advice note come out, we are following those procedures. So it's just really important that I emphasize that. I appreciate that it's just come out, but the point of this paper and the content of the paper is to update members on, and really what we've summarised here is the proposed changes, and that those proposed changes are now categorised. You'll see that following our discussions, we've categorised them in 2 sections. And most importantly, in terms of that deliberation, that we're confident that that has gone through what we had set out to do in the first instance at the start of the process, the whole way through the plan. This is just at that stage, and we're comfortable that it follows that. So I'm just probably looking feedback, Chair, on whether or not members want to discuss the other policy, the other pan. I think Councillor Maguire wants to come on there, Chair.
Chair.
Okay,
if you allow me,
Councillor.
yeah. Could I just propose that we have the debate on Thursday, and we just leave this recommendation here until we've had the whole thing in the round? This recommendation on number 5.
Are you proposing that we stop now as we are and take it no further until Thursday?
Proposed changes. I wouldn't like to propose any changes at the stage till we've had the full debate on it, if that makes sense.
I'm content that we could have that discussion now, Chair, if needs be, because the paper, you know, is really clear, and I'm more than happy to, you know, feed that into obviously the discussion today, because we have members here in terms of what impact that it may have on the LDP. But I suppose if we wait, you know, it's only part of the wider, I suppose. I'm just conscious that we have considerable amount of proposed changes. None of the very few focus changes, but more than happy. It's outside this process in terms of this paper, but we can hold the debate. But as officers, we're more than happy to clarify that the paper and what it says. I think Suzanne actually wrote the paper, but she's not here. But I'm sure I've already spoken to Prontius about it. We're more than happy to go through that as it's obviously relevant to the LDP, because you know, it's up to you, Chair, but we can discuss it.
Pontius just wants to come in there. Go ahead, Pontius.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as Maura says, we're happy to discuss it. I take it that that's the planning advice note to do with rural policy that Maura's referring to, and Councillor Maguire, I think, are possibly considering. In many ways, I would say that is something very separate and it's not directly relevant probably to this paper at all, to the LDP. It was addressed we discussed it at the recent roundtable discussion as to how it affects the LDP, and we concluded that there was a requirement for the council to take account of that guidance in the plan, and that was simply the requirement, and that we went through each of the points made, and that we didn't quite agree with them on a number of aspects, but we weren't in conflict, and it didn't require us to change the LDP. As regards to development management, I think that's a discussion probably that you can have on Thursday, but you know, it's probably quite separate, and it's definitely very separate from any of the proposals in the LDP. It's a material consideration, development management, and I think that would be a better place for that discussion. In terms of, Chair and members, come back to your concern about the DFA and, you know, Big Brother. This process hasn't changed from the outset. The big picture is that the local development plan, draft plan strategy, has been prepared by this council, by members, officers. A lot of consultation went on, and we decided on it, and we were happy with it to take it forward. We have then done consultation, and we've had a lot of representations from local people, from agents, etc. And the council, again, officers and members, have taken on board all those representations and considered them. And it would be us that are making these proposed changes. It would be the council that would be recommending these as sensible changes, which will both serve our plan better and make it more implementable and make it a better plan to meet the objectives of this district. So it would be the draft plan strategy and the changes together would be considered by the Independent Planning Appeals Commission. And very much the whole system is set up, and DFI would still reiterate that the big players in this are the Independent Planning Appeals Commission. When we submit this draft plan strategy and its changes, we submit with that a statement that we believe this plan to be sound, that it meets the objectives and the needs of this district. And therefore, it's that fundamental self-assessment of soundness. We believe that it is sound. That will be considered and interrogated really by the Independent Planning Appeals Commission, and rather than DFI per se. The system has always been then that the PAC will report back to the DFI. But I would expect, and again, we won't know until some of the other councils come through the whole process, but DFI have not indicated any wish to have a heavy-handed Big Brother influence. I would expect that they will be heavily guided by the recommendation of the Independent Planning Appeals Commission, and that this council has complied with the guidance and legislation and procedures in preparing our LDP. And mostly it's a requirement that we will take account of central government guidance. And if we are diverging from any central government guidance, that we have a good evidence base and good reasons to do so. So just to reassure members, I don't believe that there's any great change to the system. We need to get it to, I suppose, the Independent Planning Appeals Commission, and they will consider it, and hopefully will agree with the council that this is a sound plan. And members, we believe that as officers, we believe that particularly with these now proposed changes, that this is indeed a sound plan, and we would hope that it will come through the process and that PAC will
Thank you
agree,
for that, Pontius.
and DFI will also agree.
Thank you for that, Pontius. Councillor Maguire, are you prepared to accept it, or do you want to not to make a decision on proposed changes in item 8 until the items which are down for discussion on Thursday are discussed?
Chair, regardless of what's to be discussed on Thursday, right? I'm looking at, say, item 15, agriculture and rural development, it's on page 20 or 232, or whichever way you look at it. And that seems to be a hardening approach there to what was original. And I was wondering where that came about. And I don't have the policy book in front of me, but that seems to be a hardening approach to me, you know. And I was wondering, is that coming from the DFI?
Just, I mean, my advice in regards to this issue, we haven't obviously got to that paper yet, but what I was advising members is that this is a clarification on the current policy, which is PPS 21, it's current strategic policy. What we're dealing with today is our proposed emerging policy for a new plan for this council area. And what Pontius has highlighted is the officers have reviewed that document, and in terms of what's in the policy. And clearly what we have to do is take account of that in an emerging LDP. And we don't believe that it has conflict with the spirit of that particular, but in any case, it is what we are doing today is emerging policy, and what that clarification document that has been put out by DFI is about the existing policy that we are processing current planning decisions in committee. So I do take your point, and I did say to Pontius this was something that I would imagine members would be asking about. So I'm glad that you raised it. But you will see from the paper that Suzanne and I had considered and put forward to yourselves on Thursday, that with that, we still see that as a clarification. It's not a new policy. And, you know, what way DFI are interpreting that policy or clarifying that policy is a matter for themselves. And they're obviously put that out across, you know, for across whole of Northern Ireland, and they've put it out at that time. But we will go through that in detail, and I would imagine different members have different views on different interpretations or whatever aspects of that they may have clarified. But as we've highlighted, that is in regard to the current rather than bringing out new policy, what they've done instead is clarified the existing policy. And I think if you look at the paper, you'll see that Suzanne and I were emphasising that. But obviously, you know, members are going to have a discussion about that in detail on Thursday, and we'll obviously take that on board and feed that back to DFI, Angus Care, etc. At the strategic planning group as well, or whatever members decide as a committee to feed back, we will do that. But I suppose it's important that we clarify today what role or what impact that has on the current discussion focus changes. And I think Prentice has highlighted that we aren't concerned that it has, and we, any impact on how we're proceeding, as this is new emergent policy with our LDP, and and we're comfortable with the package in terms of the rural policies that we have provided to date. And as I say, we don't feel that there's any reason officers feel that we would want to, review those policies, Councillor Maguire. So I think that would be my advice at this stage. That's clear.
Councillor Maguire, do you wish to comment?
Chair, I still think there's a hardening up there, on that number 15, but rather than go through it line by line, every single, I don't know where we'd get to today.
Emma wants to come in here.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, members. Members, as Maura and Prentice have said, these are advice notes that have come, and obviously the team have approved the emerging plan against that. The plan that's here today and the changes that are being presented here today reflect the discussions and the position of the members and to date. So what I think there appears maybe to be some confusion. I fully accept what members are saying, that the advice notes maybe appear to be veering on one side. Those advice notes have not changed the content of what has been agreed by members to date in the plans and in the changes and the focus changes. The paper that's being presented here today is to get members' agreement or not on the content of the changes. But the changes that are reflected and that are presented here today are those that were discussed through this process and agreed, and as we understood, that members were content to proceed after each batch of proposed changes were dealt with at the roundtable discussions. So I fully appreciate members' concerns because of the policy advice notes. We are obliged to bring those to members' attention, and as Maura and Prentice have said, it's simply to confirm to members that the officer team is satisfied that what is being proposed and what members have agreed to date, complies insofar as the discussions that members had and reflect the proposed changes reflect the discussions, and that we don't believe that was any further changes required as a result of those advice notes. So what is being presented here today is what was agreed and reflected in the roundtable discussions to date, members. Thank you.
Thank you, Eamon. Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Chair. Just more a question, just to see, within the 8-week consultation period, how much scope is in it for changes due to feedback of that consultation? I'm just conscious of the fact we're coming out of a pandemic. We've had 4 years uncertainty around Brexit, and people were looking other directions of what was happening. So is there much scope for change within that 8-week period on feedback?
Yeah, Chair, I think we all already addressed this at one of the LDP roundtable discussions and prepared a paper specifically on that, and reviewed various issues that we felt were timely at that juncture. So we've obviously indicated that we've reviewed aspects of the plan in regards to Brexit, the pandemic, etc., and we have updated in the document in regards to that. So in terms of the consultation period, This is a publication rather than another further consultation. We've already done our counter representations and we've taken cognizance of that. And now at this stage, what we're doing is obviously providing the analysis of that, where we've made maybe minor issues, you know, we've highlighted our typos, etc. So at this stage, what we're doing is highlighting and indicating what those changes are and publishing them. And those will go forward to DFI. We are not going through a further consultation process. Otherwise, it would be constantly iterative. We would never get to a position where we have a document to take to independent examination. So this is literally an 8-week period for you know, for others to see what those proposed changes are and can submit views on that. But it'll go directly to DFI and PAC. Okay, thanks.
I'll begin again, Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you. Look, I appreciate what you're saying, and that was very much, you know, the internal process, you know, and it's the external process of keeping localized. And I think that if we're going out locally, saying this is what we've done internally, following some of the consultation, I think that there has to be some slight scope to be flexible within that consultation. And I know and appreciate it can be, you know, ongoing and where do you stop? But I think that probably owed to the consultation process to have some flexibility within that.
Sorry, just through the chair, the procedures in regards to the development plan is actually moulded in legislation. We are very, very restrictive. You will recall we had to take legal advice regarding certain details of how we went through the process. We've consulted on numerous occasions already on this strategy, quite a few times, and doubled that on the basis that we were concerned about the process not being, you know, prior to this, even the pandemic. So we've actually consulted quite a few times. So I think in terms of the legislation, it doesn't allow for further consultation at this stage. And otherwise, as I said, we would not get to a situation where we can deposit the plan. You know, we've already consulted, I think 4 times. Maybe Pontius can highlight that for me. We've consulted more times than any other council, I think, at this stage. So I think really, you know, we have to follow procedures, and I suppose what we're just indicating is that that is what the procedures are at the moment. Pontius, do you want to come in just and highlight the times that we have consulted and also what the legislation says in terms of this stage of the plan? It's probably in the paper anyway.
Yes, Maura, through the chair. Yeah, this council has carried out our statutory consultations. Firstly, from first period in December to January, 2019 to January, and then we had commenced then a period for counter representations, and that was, I think that was in March and April, and then the pandemic struck, so we had to cancel or suspend that consultation. Then in the autumn of 2020, we did a further reconsultation. So we opened that up and advertised and everything and give people the chance to put in their comments. And then from in December 2020 up till the end of January 2021, year on, we had the further period of for counter representations. So we have gone out 4 times. This consultation is very much, as Maura said, it's an opportunity for anyone to comment just on the proposed changes. And as I've indicated in the paper, the process would be that we would consult now for 8 weeks. We advertise and consult for 8 weeks, and that would take us up from middle of October right up to I think about the 9th of December, all being well. And then immediately after that, we package up any comments or whatever feedback we receive, and we submit that on to the Planning Appeals Commission. It isn't a matter of the council or officers come back and considering them. So it's clearly set out in the process, in the development plan practice note and the regulations that you know, there is no full consultation stage at this stage. And as Maura says, we have considered in paper to the recent roundtable discussion whether or not the plan is still considered to be robust and flexible enough to deal with the post-COVID situation, the post-Brexit situation, and also the latest climate change information. And we concluded that the plan is sound in that basis. So we would be proposing to put those papers out to the public again as part, so they will be submitted as part of the representation, or sorry, part of the submission to the Planning Appeals Commission to show that this council has considered all of those aspects. But no, it's correct. This advertisement and consultation period is of a limited nature. And that's again what we've set out in the statement of community involvement.
Thank you, Pontius, and Alderman Hussey, you wish to come in?
Thank you, Chair. It's been a long debate, and I'm going back to earlier in the debate to something that did worry me, was when Maura, you actually said some things were past the point, and I thought we were still in the process. Maybe I'm wrong, but you know, a major thing for folk will be the parochial, and I will be parochial. Yes, there's the big picture, but you know, for somebody, and we discussed it actually with regard to a planning application, availability of land in a place like Glenmornan, and the suitability of the boundaries in that particular area. And I suppose if we look at the second major urban settlement in the council area, and the changes that have impacted since this whole process began, and I would hate to think that I'm being told we're past the point where those things cannot be taken into consideration. If I think in terms of Strabane, we've had the city deal, and we've had proposals within the boundaries of Strabane town which are taking up quite a bit of what would have been available land with excellent development. But you know, we also then look at Brexit, and let's not forget that Strabane is a cross-border town. We look at the development of Riverine, and to be told now, you know, everything's set in stone now. That those are your boundaries. That's what you're stuck with, without taking on board what we know at this moment in time before we have said and signed off. This is our LDP. Our LDP has to be as up to date as possible. So for me, nothing can be past the post until we sign off on the actual draft that folk out there in their consultation period can look at and say, you know, let's be honest, folk in Kiln, for example, will be concerned about what the plan is doing in Kiln. We can look at the bigger picture, but those, you know, that consultation has to be at that level. When we've determined this is the draft, let's consult and let the individual parts come together for the whole as we develop that. And there will be changes, and I hope those changes will be respected. But I take totally on board what Councillor Maguire is referring to there. When Big Brother departments start to come in, it can be worrying, and we need to ensure that this is a bespoke local development plan for Derry City and Strabane District Council area. Thank you, Chair.
I'm going to ask Councillor Mooney to come in. There's been waiting a while now.
Sorry, Chair. No, I'm just listening to the debate there. Just for clarity, I mean, I think Maura did say, are we at the stage now when we go to consultation on this in the next 8 weeks? Is that a statutory function as per the Planning Act? So there is no actual, when it says consultation, we're actually saying is, if anybody replies, those replies will be contained within the document that's sent off to DFA and to PAC thereafter. So the function does state within the Planning Act that there is no actual, I suppose for better, deep-rooted consultation. Whoever, once you put that out there, whoever wants to reply by email or by telephone or contained within the submissions going to DFA, that's what, and that's only permissible under the Act as such. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Councillor Mooney, that's correct. That's exactly the position. It's not, in legal terms, a consultation period. It's a publication. I think I said that already, and I think there's just a bit of confusion in regard to that. We've had the previous consultation processes before, and we've highlighted that we've had that 4 times. So this is a publication stage. And I just want to re-emphasise that what's in front of members today in terms of the focus changes is a schedule of focus changes that have already been agreed by members in the last months. There's no new changes there. This is all a composite of all of your suggestions, agreements, discussions, and there's nothing new, and it's all there in front of you. There's no new changes or new issues. So it's just to reassure members about that. And I don't know where or what part of the discussion, but I just want to clarify, I didn't say, it wouldn't be my terminology to say we're past the post. It's not something that I've ever said. So it must have been somebody else, because we're still here after all this length of time. I have never, and I'm touching wood as I'm speaking, I've never ever, I'm not somebody who counts our chickens before they're hatched ever. That's not how I operate. So I certainly didn't say that, Councillor Hussey. It must have been somebody else. So I'm more than happy to take any more questions as well. Thanks.
Any questions for, okay, Councillor?
Something, Chair. On the tables, right, there's 11 columns. On the 6th column, the 5th is proposed change, and then the 6th is rep, and then brackets underneath it, issue reference. If you can see, if you go down at NIE networks and DERA, these proposed changes, obviously, is these the people that made the recommendation to propose the change, or?
Yeah, so what you'll have as a reference number, the page strategy that it refers to, we've highlighted the policy reference or where the new policy paragraph might be that we've possibly thought would be useful if somebody's made a suggestion that we need to double, maybe link it with another paragraph or another policy. And then the summary of the issue would be a summary of the discussion or the officers. These were all put the same way that they were put in the LDP discussions. They were put forward. And the actual documentation would have been put in front of members as well, and the actual letters. So what you've got then is the proposed change as a result of the discussion. Thank you.
Any further members wish to speak? Councillor Mooney?
Thank you, Chair. So really today, I mean, really, if I right in my head, are we really today is we're actually seeking, officers are seeking for us to endorse what's in the tables now as a true and accurate reflection of what's really happened over the last 4 years or 5 years as the process.
I suppose what I would say is it's a summary of the consideration of the consultation process, and that what you've got is there's been various views and opinions and tensions and issues that have emerged as a result of the consultation process. These have been analysed and discussed by officers and members, and what this is a table of the summary of what potential actions we think are required, many of which has been highlighted in the report as typos or presentational issues. Those that are substantive, clearly we have carefully considered, and the officers have then further considered whether they think these are focus changes or not. And you can see from the report what our analysis is of that. And clearly what we are doing as professionals is attempting to obviously distill all that on the basis of it being a new process and on the basis of what we've seen in advance with the other councils, you know, and using the benefit of that experience. And I suppose that's where we are today. Thank you.
Okay, so what we have here is the LDP update and proposed changes. Do we wish to move forward with it, or are you asking us to suspend discussing it any further, Councillor Maguire?
Chair, if I'm going back to the culture and our development in the countryside, you know, all DFI strategic planning has commented on them all. Boxes in yellow has come from DFI planning. Heading change is a bit strong. So I wouldn't be for moving forward with it, Chair.
Chair, I wonder could we, I just think the officers need clarification exactly what the issue is, because I'm not sure what it is. And I'm sure, unfortunately for me, my officers aren't here with me, but I'm just confused as to what exactly the issue is that we need to discuss, because we've obviously gone through this before. I appreciate this is a massive table and I really would like to know what it is we have a one particular issue with at this stage. I'm really quite confused.
Councillor Maguire, could you maybe give us clarity what page we're looking at here? And you need to put your mic on, mate.
Forms of development should be located in the settlements. Explicit stuff, no, that it's basically the first line, I think, is too strong. First two lines. It's implicit through the sustainable development.
Sorry, could you just take us exactly to the, we can't, I don't even know which part of the document we're at.
15, agriculture and other development.
15, is it focus change 15? Is it, does anyone?
Page 20 or down the side, page 233.
Sorry, what's the PC number just there, Councillor Maguire, so that officers can actually see which one it is and we can.
118, is it?
198?
118.
Right, thank you. Chair, I wonder can we take a few minutes? I need to discuss this with officers. It's so specific.
Okay, Maura, we'll take a recess for 10 minutes, do you?
PC number 1. Page 232.
Just see, let's go.
Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to allow Pontius to finish his presentation, and then I'm going to hand it over to Councillor Maguire to ask specific question to Pontius and for his replies. Councillor Maguire.
Chair, I thought Pontius was coming back to me tomorrow. Is that not? Oh, this today.
Okay with that, yeah? Pontius, please.
Okay, Chair, can you hear me okay?
Fine, thank you.
That's good, right. Yeah, if it's okay, members, and please bear with me, I'll try not to keep it too long. We'll propose to take us through, resume the key points in the actual paper, and then that will get on to the substantive content of the actual proposed changes table that you're actually talking about. So hopefully we'll have gone through this presentation, and hopefully we will have covered these key points, and then we can take questions on that in a probably possibly a structured manner. Okay, members, I got to that section 2627, and it said that the development plan practice note, number 10, that is about processes and procedures. It's very different from a planning advice note that was being referred to. This is a development plan practice note, and it's about the process. And in us preparing the LDP, we really should be following or taking account of this process. So I suppose the issue, members, that are set out in this paper in section 3 is that whereas DPPN 10 expects us to set out a schedule of focus changes and then a separate schedule of minor changes, that we have taken account of that, but we believe that it's only appropriate to do one single schedule of all of our proposed changes, because most of the changes don't fit neatly into the categories of just minors, being typos and things like that. And again, most of them are not focus changes that would undermine or affect the soundness of the LDP, because if there's a lot of them, that's going to be difficult to argue at the independent examination. So members, as a number of other councils have done, we are proposing to do one schedule of all our proposed changes. And to some it's a subtlety, but it's something that we're going to have to make the case and argue over at the independent examination. So members, as I've set out in 3.2 and 3.3, officers, ourselves and yourselves have discussed all of these points, all the main points certainly, and we have proposed a schedule of 250 proposed changes. Of those, we have highlighted the 26 which we believe are substantial. We're not calling them focus changes as per DPPN 10, we're calling them substantial changes or substantive changes, and they're highlighted in yellow. There are also 67 minor changes which are highlighted in grey, and they really are just justification and application and fairly minor typos, etc. And then the largest category are in between. They are intermediate changes, which we've highlighted in green for the information of yourselves and for any readers when it goes out to consultation. And members, we believe that this will be useful as a categorization. As I've said there in para 3.5, it is important to note what's not there. None of the 250 proposed changes are considered to be fundamental changes to the LDP draft plan strategy. Neither do the cumulative totality of those changes amount to what would be considered fundamental. Because in accordance with the DPPN advice note, practice note, if there's a fundamental change or a fundamental problem with the plan, we would be expected to withdraw our draft plan strategy and go back to the drawing board. So members, and hopefully you'll agree, there are no fundamental changes proposed to the draft plan strategy. It's important to note that. In para 3.6, I've indicated that the most substantive changes have been highlighted in yellow in the schedule. And those, I'm going to take a brief run through the most notable ones, and this is the substantive changes that one of which you've referred to, Councillor, and hopefully give some clarification on that, and then we can take specific queries on this or any of the other proposed changes, members. The first one, members, that I would bring to your attention is there's para 3.7. I've highlighted that there are a number of proposed changes, PCs, that clarify that the general development principles and general development policies apply to all planning applications. And we're also adding in that a policy relating to biodiversity and to health, and that no development should cause or contribute to a major accident. So they were already in the principles, but it's to clarify that they are brought through to the policies, and it's just common sense that they should apply to all applications. The second point in 3.8, it's about strengthening the city and town centres by ensuring that if there are small scale offices or R&D, they should also be preferably located in the city or town centres. So that's arising from representations, and it was pointed out that the plan would be more sound and be a better plan and support the city and town centres if that change is included. At para 3.9, members, again, to do with retailing and the city town centres, that policy clarifies the retail hierarchy. It clarifies that it doesn't change it. We also clarify the definition of the extent of the edge of centre locations. And also we clarify that any proposal that there's a sequence from primary retail core, if it can't be in the primary retail core, a shop should then be in the rest of the city or town centre before going to an edge of centre site. Members, in paragraph 310, probably what Councillor Maguire was referring to, we have included two highlighted proposed changes, 119 to 121, on the chapter on other development in the countryside. And in particular, we include a new policy, ODC1, and that very much is considered to be a signpost policy. It signposts to all the other categories of development that are acceptable in our countryside, whilst ensuring that other development proposals should be located in settlements in the first instance in the interest of sustainable development objectives of the LDP, because we will be tested against sustainability and sustainable development. This isn't something which is new as such. It's in the existing policy, and it would be expected to be there in terms of sustainability. This is the signposting policy, members, and it lists all the, it's in the Annex 2 at the end of the schedule with our proposed wording, and we've said that it lists all the types of development which are acceptable in the countryside already in our LDP. So those are farm diversification proposals, agriculture or forestry development, reuse of existing buildings, tourism development as per chapter 12, industry and business use, retailing, minerals, in accordance with chapter 13, outdoor sport and recreation, renewable energy projects as per 24, and all necessary community facilities to serve local populations, essential infrastructure, etc. So it's a signpost for all of those policies, and we are not taking away from any of them that have already been discussed and agreed, and if anything, they are more generous than are in the existing policies. Members will be glad to hear that. But it's just that if there were other developments in the countryside, in interest of sustainable development, we will be questioned, or we'll be expected to have that signposting policy that the default is, look, if something else comes along, if it's like if it's a motorway service station, or if it's a park and ride, whatever, the first choice should be that it cannot be in a settlement, and if not, then it can then be considered for that countryside location. So it's that signposting. It's not new, but it would be expected to be in the plan, and if we're to achieve a soundness vote. Members, then in para 311, we highlight there's a number of proposed changes to the strategic housing policy, and particularly policies How 1 and How 5. This was discussed at the recent roundtable discussion meeting, and it was to address issues that members had expressed their concern about. Specifically, members were concerned that unimplemented housing land was being land banked. So we are proposing to introduce the principle that if housing land is unimplemented, that it could be reviewed and rezoned so that it isn't there in perpetuity. So that this will assist the deliverance of actual building houses. The second point that we're proposing in these changes is that there will be phase 3 zonings of strategic housing land reserve. And this was requested by quite a few representations, and also members felt strongly that if we are actually to ensure that there will be enough land to deliver on the social houses that this district and particularly the city undoubtedly need, that we should have in this phase 3 strategic housing land reserve. And this is another tool which would help us to deliver and ensure delivery of enough social houses. The third aspect, members, that we propose change is around the proportion of other lands which for housing, which would actually be required to be social housing. Members, and it was requested by the housing executive that there should be a 20% requirement for any other housing development as social housing. So we carefully looked at the supply of housing land, particularly in Derry City, and I can talk more about this in detail if members want. We felt that there is more than adequate land for social housing over the planned period, and with these additional safeguards in here, i.e. for to counter land banking and to have phase 3 reserve, there's an awful lot of current commitments and current permissions which can be delivered upon and will be enough to deliver social housing. Therefore, we believe that there's no evidence to justify demanding 20% of every housing development to be social housing. In practice, we are actually achieving, over the past, say, 5 years, we're achieving approximately 50% of all housing in the district is social houses. Over the bleak periods from 2007 to 2010, it would have been 90% of all housing being built in the district was social housing. So over the past 5 years, it's an average of 49%. Further figures on that there. So members, we do not believe that there is enough evidence to force us raising the bar to 20%. Therefore, members, the recommendation is that it remains at a minimum of 10%, but if there's a higher need, then that scope is there also. But the emphasis on this policy now is on having balanced communities, not just the quantum, so that there is a balanced community, and we've recommended that it should be a 70-30 ratio. Members, at 3.12, we introduce very sensible and necessary policy relating to the protection of trees and hedgerows, both in planning applications and formally protected ones by tree preservation orders. At 3.13, we bring to your attention that NAEA Historic Environment have sought quite a few changes. Very few of them are in themselves substantive, but they really want a lot of justification and amplification changes. So that's worthy of bringing to your attention. Then, members, on para 3.14, we highlight that the policies on renewable development. In the existing draft plan strategy, we have one big RED 1 policy, which is renewable energy development. We're proposing to break that up quite sensibly into a general RED 1 policy, which applies to all renewable applications, and then a RED 2 to do with wind power, a RED 3 to do with solar power, and then another one for anaerobic digestion and another for hydro. So members, it looks like quite a bit of changes, but it's breaking it up into manageable policies. Similarly, for the transportation chapter, we've proposed some reordering to make it a better written and more logical document. And members, para 315, we highlight that we are proposing PC 248 to introduce social clauses for most development as a community benefit. That's something that was raised by some of the representations, and members felt that that was a very good idea. Then we have proposed changes about the monitoring criteria and the review. So those are the totality of the proposed changes. Just to bring members' attention to 316, all these changes have been subjected to a sustainability appraisal, habitats regulations appraisal, assessment, and Johnny will talk about that in the next paper. Also, an equality impact assessment paper, Johnny will talk about that. And then a rural needs impact assessment has also been undertaken on these proposals, and John will address that. So those are the proposed changes. Additionally, we will be updating the evidence-based, some of the evidence-based papers. And for example, the likes of those papers on post-Brexit, post-COVID, and climate change would be submitted as part of the evidence base with our plan documents. So members, I'm now happy to take questions and provide any clarity on any specific aspects of this paper or any of the points in the appendix document. So the idea is that if members are happy with it, then the process that would go to full council and then will be advertised and then submitted. But before that, members, before the recommendation, I'm happy to take any questions on any specific points in the Appendix 5. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Philip Pontius. That was very in depth. Thank you. Any motions, question for Pontius? Councillor Jackson, please.
Very good, Chair, and thanks, Pontius, for what was a very in-depth report. And I want to start by acknowledging the amount of work that's went into this by primarily officers, but all the members who have attended the roundtable discussions and fed into the process. And there has, as Pontius has outlined, there's over 250 representations with various different views expressed, and officers have done a great job in terms of condensing that down and taking into consideration the different views that were expressed. I know Councillor Maguire had expressed the frustrations earlier around interference from the Department of Infrastructure. And that's evident right throughout this paper, and we've seen how the consultation responses from that particular department had been heavily weighted and influenced our development plan. Pontius alluded to earlier around in reference to the housing section of our development plan, and it's something, and unsurprisingly, given the fact that we've got a housing crisis within our council area, a pretty chronic housing crisis where there's upwards of 4,000 families that are homeless, that are in dire, desperate need. And for a lot of people, they see this development plan as an opportunity to address that need. So it's not surprising that a lot of the focus is had been on the housing paper. And whenever we looked at the response from the housing executive, who have a responsibility to try and address that need, we heard how the views of members and the views of the consultees, particularly the housing executive, were listened to, but officers didn't agree that that the views expressed were valid, and that was in reference to the 20% quota. And that leads me to the assumption that this isn't a members-led plan, it isn't a council-led plan. If we've got almost a unanimous view that in order to meet the social housing need in this area and address the chronic need, then we need to look outside the box. We need to make radical changes. And unfortunately, we're in a position where, whether it's the constraints that are placed on us by various departments, for whatever reason, we're left in a situation now where you're going to hear the views of members and the views of consultees won't be considered. They don't stack up. And in my view, as somebody who's been a part of this process for a long time, it's frustrating and it's disappointing. We've heard through the consultation and outside of the consultation as well, when you're speaking to, like we would speak through our daily constituent services, we would be in regular contact with housing associations, and housing associations tell us very, very clearly that land availability is one of the biggest constraints in terms of addressing the chronic housing need that exists, particularly here in the city. Yet again, we're told that there's adequate land, don't worry about it. That's completely, it's completely contrary to what we're hearing from those organisations that have a duty, an opportunity to address that need and actually do something and build housing. Unfortunately, whilst I recognise the progress in terms of identifying phase 3 land and creating a strategic housing land reserve, there's not enough contained within that to assure us that that land would be adequate to try and address the housing need. Now, we have to bear in mind that there's 4,000 families in Derry alone that are homeless, and the wording within that phase 3 strategic housing land says that we'll be comprising a limited amount of land that previously lay out just outside of the city, a limited amount of land to address the 4,000 homeless, and it's growing. It isn't year on year we see the housing waiting list growing. That, to me, that's not ambitious enough. And whether that's because there's a department looking over our shoulder that's saying you can't do this or you can't do that, it's hampering us in terms of creating a development plan that's going to meet the needs of our city and district. And for that reason, and for many other reasons, as outlined by Councillor Maguire earlier, it's putting us in a very difficult position at this point. We're in terms of signing off and progressing this, because it does fall short in so many instances where the needs of the people living within our council area are almost overlooked, and the interests of private landowners are almost put to the front. And I certainly, that's something that I'm very, very uncomfortable, and it's something as a party we're very uncomfortable with. So unfortunately, whilst appreciating the work that's went into this to date, we don't feel that this is going far enough, and we don't believe that we're making the most this draft plan strategy and the changes that are proposed here today going far enough in terms of we're not making the most of the opportunity that's in front of us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for those comments, Councillor Jackson, and I think a lot of people within the chamber would, and virtual chamber would agree with you there. There's definitely a problem with the land being made available, but I see that in the LDP, the officers have tried to address that by changing the what's we're looking for from H2 down to H3 if people will not release the land. So we are, as officers, they are trying to address it. And I note we also say a minimum of 10%. And I'm wondering, is there movement there? Can that be pushed up to 15, 20%, or are we stuck with 10%? Also, Patricia, I see you wish to come in, but I'm going to have to get some clarity on that from Philip Kingston, as you're not a member and the protocol states it's supposed to be 2 days in advance if you wish to speak. So if you could just bear with us, please, Patricia, and come in, Philip, please.
Sorry, apologies, Chair. No, the process in relation to this meeting is the same as it would be if it was a physical meeting. So we shouldn't make any distinction between this meeting and a physical meeting in terms of who can speak and when.
So, Philip, what you're saying is Patricia cannot comment now?
If that's what our protocol states, Chair, then in relation to the LDP meetings, then that's the position, I'm afraid.
Thank you for clarity. Any other members wish to speak? So we have in front of us a recommendation to, my apologies, Pontius, would you like to come back, please, on some of those points?
Thank you, Chair. Certainly, for giving me the opportunity to come back and responding, I suppose, to Councillor Jackson's concerns. And certainly, I think as officers, we have certainly heard all these concerns, and we have done our absolute best to address and to deliver a local development plan which will meet the requirements and the needs of this city and this district. Yet we do have to do it within the confines of an LDP, which we believe will deliver sustainable development. And we believe it certainly, we need to get the balance between providing adequate land to deliver housing, social houses, particularly affordable housing, to meet the needs of Derry. I think, as we discussed at the recent roundtable discussion, we need to have evidence. We need to have evidence to support that. And we, as officers, have done our very best to go through all the statistics and all the looked at all the land and the maps and to see what is available and what is in the pipeline. And just to recap, the government, it's not just the government being Big Brother, it's the statisticians have said through the housing growth indicator, they've said that this is the amount of population, this is the age profile of the population, this is how many houses they believe that this district will need or be able to provide over the next, over up to 2032 through the plan period. So the housing growth indicator for Derry would suggest that it would need about, that there's enough people to require about 2,500, in broad terms, about 2,500 houses. That's what it says. But this council didn't accept that. We believe, and we're going for our LDP and our strategic growth plan, we're saying, no, there's such a severe housing need and the ambitions of this district that we need probably somewhere in the range of 5,500 houses. And that would be an ambitious target for us to build over the period, about 5,500 houses. So we look to see how much land have we got to deliver that. And we have identified that there's enough land for about 12,500 houses. And that there is from all the existing between zone land, land with planning permissions, and what we call commitments. So there's 8,000 on zoned land and another 1,500 on outside of zoned land. And we've also identified urban capacity land of about 2,500. And those sites will be emerging at the local policies plan. We will identify them. So we believe that there's land for 12,600 houses. On top of that, we have built in the exception, the phase 3 strategic land reserve, that if for any reason we're not able to get enough land to deliver the social houses, then that phase 3 land will be able to deliver, at local policies plan stage. But we need to get to through the plan strategy and the local policies plan stage to be able to deliver that for the housing. So we have been able to, I can go in the details of where exactly all this land is, all those sites, which ones have got permission, which ones are in the pipeline, and there is an awful lot of land. So that's where the conflict comes from, what housing associations are probably saying. We believe that there is adequate land, and if we're not able to identify it and deliver it at the local policy plan stage, then it can be done on the phase 3 strategic land reserve. In quantum terms, the housing executive have identified that there is a need for 4,750 social houses up to 2032. We have identified that there is land pretty much ready to go for about 4,400 of those houses. That's a very significant amount. Therefore, we would only need to identify additional land on the phase 3 reserve or on the urban capacity for about another 400. And it's only at that stage that this 10% or 20% kicks in. So it's not going to make the difference. We believe that there is adequate land and that this LDP will strategically, and this is the strategy, this isn't the detail, it doesn't zone specific lands, but this will strategically enable the council to deliver enough land to meet the social housing need if we can get this LDP through and delivered. In terms of what percentage we're getting, we are building. I know it's not enough, it's not fast enough, and I can appreciate why members are frustrated. But over the past 5 years, we have been delivering, we've delivered, there's been 1,500 houses, social houses built in this city, in the district alone. The vast majority have been in Derry City. And that's 49% of all houses have been social houses. And that's a very, very high proportion, far more than any other district in Northern Ireland. We already have a very high proportion, and this is very high, higher than anywhere else. But we believe that strategically there is enough land, and there will be enough land being able to be brought forward through the draft plan strategy, and particularly with these proposed changes. So, we're happy to, we have provided these figures and hopefully discussed it, and we believe that this is the best possible evidence-based solution that we can come up with as officers and members, something that we can defend as meeting the needs of the district, but also in a reasonably sustainable manner. So members, hopefully, maybe if that gives you any reassurance on that specific point on the how 1 and how 5 policies. Okay, Chair.
Maura wishes to come in now.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's important just that I come sort of strategically on the detail there that Frances has highlighted, and I suppose it's disappointing from our perspective that we've reached this point and we haven't been able to, I suppose, reassure members about every aspect of the plan, but obviously there's been a considerable number of issues and challenges that that officers and members have resolved, and we're really at this point dealing with, maybe 1 or 2 issues that we're trying to, I suppose, finish off with, and we always knew that there might be issues that we won't be in complete agreement with at this point. But I suppose it's important that I highlight, I suppose, the thought process and the work that has been done in terms of officers and members listening to the issues, particularly in regard to social housing. And really, I suppose, as a council, in comparison to other council planning departments, we have a considerable amount of experience in dealing with social housing issues in terms of the amount of applications that we've had to deal with over the last 5-10 years. So there's a definite expertise and knowledge about the issue, and also about trying to address it in terms of operational development. And I suppose it's important that I highlight that in the strategy itself, we have already adopted or suggested a policy that would be there in order to consider exceptional circumstances in and around whereby where there was a social housing need or demonstrated need provided. That has already obviously been part of a consultation process. Again, you know, just as a starting point, that has been the position that is new and unique, you know, for our area and responding to the local circumstances. So at the outset, the plan itself has already attempted to sort of address that issue. So that's point one. Point two is the issue of land banking. Was obviously a big issue discussed the whole way through this process, and I suppose what we have obviously tried to explain to members and ourselves in terms of what our role is in planning and what we can and can't do, what's within our remit and powers as an organisation. You know, and we don't have a role in terms of budgeting or affecting, I suppose, in and around the value of funding certain projects in order to, I suppose, compete with land values. You know, in all our role, we have attempted outside, I suppose, what would be the norm, and made a suggestion here, an innovative suggestion in regards to addressing land banking by rezoning land that where a reasonable time frame during the plan process has passed, that we would ask or really remove the suppose the right to retain that as housing, etc. So there's issues there that I think officers have attempted, you know, obviously to address, and have gone over and above the normal response, because we're obviously aware of this local circumstances, and obviously listening to the views of the members and the consultees. I suppose the housing executive have a different role and have different powers to the planning department, and I would highlight that we have met them and tried to explain what the development plan process is about, and the actual process that we need to explain to the independent examination in terms of the quantity of land. And I suppose I'm not convinced that they fully appreciate that role that we have. Ultimately, you know, our role is to provide land, and obviously the amount and extent of that is up for scrutiny. So I suppose in that respect, I would just remind members that that detailed meeting we had and papers that were presented, officers did examine those in detail. We have not looked at this in any sort of a frivolous manner. We have really considered this, and we have asked the housing executive to produce any more documentation or evidence that they would have to help us support the increase of a 10% to 20%. But without that evidence, it's very, very difficult for professional officers to attempt to justify that. And I suppose that's kind of where we are now in the round of that, and looking at that whole package of innovative, I suppose, mechanisms that we have tried within our remit of the planning system. And I suppose really where we are is, you know, if members wish to vote to adapt any aspects of the plan at this point in terms of proposed changes. Obviously, that's something that we will take on board, and that would be done simply the same as if we were dealing with a planning application. And we would make recommendations if members were proposing to do that in terms of maybe other processes that would be required, like reviewing the SEA and the quality impact, just ensuring that if those changes were being considered by members, a bit like when we deal with our conditions members, if members are of a view to do that, I would obviously caution proceeding without just asking officers to check that. But clearly we will take, it's a matter for members, whatever aspects of the proposal that we have in front in terms of our recommendation. It's a matter for members to decide and give us direction, and we will respond then depending on what those issues might be remaining. So I suppose that's really, hopefully that's providing clarity and direction, Chair, on the circumstances. Thank you.
Okay, members, we have a recommendation there, and if any members got recommendations they wish to put forward to the planners, we go for this. Councillor Maguire?
Chair, just like Councillor Jackson, I have an issue just with that new policy, DC1, sign posting policy, I just alluded to, and Chair, I think it might need more discussion at another meeting, just it could be put on for Thursday or something, but certainly to me, deviates from the discussions that we have had right throughout the LDP process. Just on that note, Chair, I wouldn't be agreeing.
Councillor Moore, would you wish to comment on that?
No, I think, I mean, if we're not proceeding, and Councillor Maguire requires further clarification, or I suppose it's a matter for the committee to vote on how to direct officers at this stage in terms of this particular stage of the plan. Are we deferring this, or are we making I mean, that's just one aspect of the plan. I suppose we need direction in terms of the whole process. If it is that members wish to defer, and we'll remove it and have further meetings, we will, and we'll have to defer the timetable as well.
Councillor Maguire, do you want to defer it for further discussion? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, well, like Councillor Jackson's issue and the issue of the new policy ODC1. The rest, Chair, it seems, you know, to live with, but if it all has to be deferred, then so be it.
And this is really a question for the planner. Can we put recommendations in, take it forward and put recommendations in for it to discuss further certain parts of it?
I suppose I need direction. It's a matter for the full committee to direct me in terms and to direct myself and Eamon as to where we're at today. This is a full, I mean, there's, you know, obviously new issues here. We had already discussed and agreed these aspects of the plan, and I suppose these are all our new recommendations. I mean, if you're saying that we, you know, I don't know exactly what the change is. It's clear. I don't know what the vote is in regards to this, so I think it's really a matter for yourselves to direct us. Are you deferring the whole plan, or are there aspects of the plan that have to be further discussed? And if so, we won't be able to take this forward to the full council. I just need to understand.
Okay, Councillor Maguire, Councillor Jackson. Do you want to come in, Councillor Jackson? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Maura. I just, I don't believe that these are new issues. I believe that these issues have been well rehearsed. And I really do appreciate the work that officers have done to try and they try and make the changes and facilitate the concerns that members have raised, but it doesn't go far enough, and that's the crutch of it. See, whenever we're being told that there's new issues being raised, I think that the main issue is that we've raised concerns throughout the roundtable discussions. And in my view, and our party's view, the paper that's in front of us now doesn't reflect our position that we expressed at the roundtable discussions, and now we're being asked to vote on it. And I just don't accept that these are new issues that are being raised. And I've already expressed our concern is that we cannot endorse the recommendation that's in front of us for that very reason.
Thank you for that, Councillor Jackson. Just to clarify, I've had a message from the Philip Kingston. He's had to leave to go to a meeting. I see John's asking for some clarity from the solicitor. John, would you like to speak on the matter?
Thanks, Chair, but now that you've told me that the city solicitor has left, there's not much point in me asking the question. I mean, I think we all understand the process moving forward from here, and we're all very keen to reach a conclusion that would be mutually acceptable to absolutely everyone. And I remain to be convinced but with reference to Councillor Jackson, I remain to be convinced on 10%, 20%. I think we probably want to try and tease that out a little bit more to see what the implications of that are. And I appreciate the answers that we've had from officers. The clarity I was seeking from the city solicitors is kind of based around the fact that committees present recommendations to full council, and then full council either rejects or endorses them. That's certainly my understanding, Chair, at the minute. And so I suppose I am, and perhaps others are as well. We're kind of sitting halfway in the dark here. I think the last thing we would want to do would be to not give things an appropriate airing, and I think we've certainly done some of that today. But at the same time, I have a question for Councillor Jackson and Councillor Maguire in that how do they see us progressing here? Because there's one view that they take, there's another view that officers take, and I can't read the mind of fellow members. This is the planning committee, so I'm only working John Boyle on his own, and I am driven, actually. I'm not kind of, I am driven in the direction of perhaps a bit of breathing space might help. But as I said, in the absence of the city solicitor, my question really was, well, what if we have the paper in front of us? We recommend the paper that it's in front of us to the full council, and then let the full council make that decision. That is one option, and then of course that affords us everybody, all 40 members, the breathing space over the next week or so to consider and consider further. So a few questions and no answers, I suppose, is where I'm coming from here, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Boyle. I have Councillor Gallagher wishes to come in.
Thank you, Chair. First, I would just say, like, on the process we've undertaken in the previous number of years, it's trying to move it forward on a consensus approach, in the sense of the last thing we want to do is just chuck it in the middle of the chamber and have a dogfight over it. I think here and then this committee is probably the proper place to get a consensus. And look, I can understand where officers are coming from. This has been bit back and forward, and trying to find a balanced position is very difficult to meet the needs of both planning officers and elected members and others through the process. So maybe possibly, and I can understand also over the last 4 or 5 months, there's probably been a difficulty around engagement and the roundtable discussions where some people were there, some people weren't, and how do you proceed with you know, a limited number of participants, and then getting to an agreement with that, then moving on, and then someone coming back in and maybe wanting to see changes, and that's where we're sort of going round and round in circles. But there's also the element of that as we move forward, we definitely don't want as a council to be hamstrung and completely bound up by a plan that we discussed and argued and debated at length and didn't get a consensus on. And then, you know, the phrase, I told you so, you know, that is to our disadvantage. So maybe possibly, maybe there might be room for another roundtable discussion as a one before sending it into the chamber as a bear pit, you know, to be ripped apart, because I don't think that that's where we should get to.
Just going to allow you to come in here who's been indicated want to speak.
Members, firstly, there was a query, you know, on the position of this going to the council. So yes, Councillor Boyle, yes, if this committee, whatever recommendations committee makes, would go to council because it is the LDP, and the LDP is the council's plan. In an attempt to move this forward, members, I believe that, you know, this is in the hands of members, and I can't stress that enough. You know, this is members' decision, and the content is also should reflect the council position. So in an attempt to move forward, well, we have a proposal on, sorry, we have a recommendation on the table, and some members have expressed concerns about specific aspects. Options that remain open, obviously, is to take a vote to see if whether or not there is a proposed for a seconder for the recommendation that is on the table, and if not, then members are free to make alternative recommendations on the proposal that is on the table, but it must come from yourselves, members, from officers. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, members, is anybody? Okay, Councillor.
Chair, just on one point, I was just listening to the debate there. Just in terms of Councillor Jackson and Councillor McGuire, I mean, if we're going to adjourn for discussion, is it on discrete issues that were just raised, or is it going to be for the whole? But it's just those discrete issues that have been raised by Councillor McGuire, Councillor Jackson, on the issue of obviously the allocation point percentages and the C1 that Councillor McGuire has pointed out. So I'm just seeking clarity on that. Obviously, it might actually might be a long meeting, or it could be a lengthy meeting. I'm just wondering if that is going to be the case. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, mine is the.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor.
Just- Sorry, Chair, the new policy, that ODC one, just, Chair, that's the issue.
Sorry, Chair, can I just say that, you know, there's nothing, as Councillor Jackson is saying, is new. That isn't a new policy, and neither is the issue. The Councillor Jackson's quite right. I don't know what else officers can say or add. We've discussed these at length, and we've also got a really detailed paper. We've done a detailed paper on the, you know, certain aspects of this. Don't know how constructive, apart from pushing it down the line to come back again and for officers to be recommending the same. I think really, you know, it's really if members want to recommend, you know, if they, in my view, members are proposing simply like we do deal with the planning decision process. If they vote not to accept the recommendation, and then make a second proposal to change aspects of the plan and direct officers to change it, we can change it, absolutely no problem. And we can then advise whether on the condition we would recommend that you would do whatever before you would publish, for instance. I think that would be my suggestion in terms of dealing with the social housing issue. But in regards to other potential, it's very difficult for officers to be coming back with another recommendation. But we can obviously consider any proposals that members put to us today or another time, but be mindful of just the timetable being adjusted as well.
Okay, members, going to go to a vote. We're going to vote on to accept the recommendation, officers. Okay, can somebody propose that?
All right, Chair,
Seconder.
Chair John Boyle here, just briefly, if you don't mind. I was up on the chat box there. You reading?
Okay, yes, John, you want to ask Philip the question now?
Is he back? No, I think Eamon's answered it anyway. I wouldn't worry too much about that, Chair. Chair, notwithstanding everything that Maura has just said, I feel that it would certainly be useful to, for want of a better way, park on this for further consideration and discussion around a round table. And so, I mean, there's the recommendation right in front of us now is to push this forward and recommend it to full council. There clearly are some outstanding issues, and I'm a great believer that if people can get in and around a table, you know, can sometimes work your way through these things. You know, when push comes to shove, then push will come to shove. We do all understand that. And Councillor Gallagher is quite correct as well. You know, there's difficulties in the sense that not everybody was able to always engage with the process. And I'd be concerned that we're getting to a point now at a very, very critical stage when members aren't reducing and again reiterating concerns that those concerns certainly should not be ignored. I don't think that would be appropriate. And so there's two issues that have just been identified by two members on the committee, and Councillor Mooney did ask the question, well, if we were to go sit down around the round table and just discuss this one paper, then those are the two issues that we would be discussing. So, Chair, I'm not sure if you'll allow me to do this, but I'm actually going to make a proposal that we defer this for further round table discussion and do not proceed this paper forward to full council until such time as that discussion has happened between members of the planning committee and actually non-members of the planning committee too.
John, I'll accept that proposal. Do we have a seconder?
Chair, I'm content to second, or Alderman Hussey, it'll not matter.
It doesn't matter. Go ahead, Keith.
Right, I'm content to second Councillor Boyle's proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Philip. Yeah,
Chair,
Councillor Jackson.
Philip here, if I may come in just for one moment, just in relation to that proposal.
Go ahead, Philip. Thank you.
Yeah, it's just to note that obviously, you know, this paper will go before full council. You know, that can't be avoided. I think it's very unlikely that the full council would take a different view from this committee in relation to that particular proposal, but it's just to note that obviously it will go before the full council at the end of the month as a recommendation, rather than you know, we can't place a compulsion on full council in respect to that particular matter.
Can I, Philip, just be clear, are you saying we can't defer it then?
No, Chair, I'm quite content that the proposal is to defer, and you know, that's quite. I'm quite content that we can go, we can defer, and that's the recommendation of this committee, that we defer. That's absolutely fine. The issue just was within the proposal. I think there was a comment from Councillor Boyle that we don't put this matter before full council, and that's outside of our control. It will go before full council. but with a recommendation from this committee that it's deferred pending a roundtable discussion. As I say, I think it's extremely unlikely that full council would take a different view from the committee in relation to that particular matter, but we can't stop it going before full council. That's the only point that I make.
Chair John here again, Chair. Just I get that now. I appreciate what Philip's saying. So effectively, we would be putting the proposal in front of full council, but it's very likely that full council would share the view that a deferral would be helpful and useful. And of course, that's not predicting the word of the full council, but that's what I'm proposing, that we put this to full council and let the full council decide whether a deferral would be useful or not.
Do you want to come in now, Councillor Jackson?
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate that there's a proposal on the floor that's seconded to defer, and content with that, but I'm not optimistic. These issues have been discussed before, and members' views haven't been reflected in the paper that's came in front of us, and I want the reassurances that if members express a view that's contrary to maybe the views that are held by DFA or our officers, will that be allowed to be presented to committee? Because that's something that we've see in particular the housing case. The housing paper has been deferred 3 or 4 times. They allow for further roundtable discussions because there hasn't been a consensus. There hasn't been an acknowledgement. Well, we don't believe that that we've been able to make adequate progress to address the need that exists within our city. And I'm just very briefly, we heard in terms of the Phase 3 strategic housing land, that land reserve could provide opportunities for up to 400 houses. See, the area where I live and represent in the Top of Hull area, there's nearly 500 on the waiting list already, and there's no available housing land. So that's something that you're turning around and telling anybody that's on the housing list, homeless in Top of Hill, that you've no opportunity as part of this to be housed in the community where you were born and reared, and that's something that's replicated right across our council area. It exists in the Foyle Road, Craigan, no, and right across in various areas in our city and district. I know as a committee, we've been left in positions as a committee with applications for social housing on areas that are prone to flooding because there isn't available land for housing. I know we've heard that we've had an acknowledgement that zoned housing land is at a premium, and it's beyond the reach of many housing associations. And I completely accept that may not be a matter for the planning committee as such, but we have to acknowledge that zoned housing land is at a premium because of the constraints that exist, and that's something I suppose that as a committee we've got an opportunity to address, and that's where we're coming at it. Is let's look outside the box. Let's look at creating opportunities, and having a go at really addressing the housing need, making providing homes for the thousands of people that really badly need them, and they need them now. So that's something that I think we shouldn't allow that opportunity. We shouldn't allow it to let us pass us by. And I just don't want to go into another roundtable discussion, maybe the 4th or 5th roundtable discussion, and then end up in the exact same position. I think if we're coming on it, we need to come on it with a complete, fresh approach. And I acknowledge the work the council have done. They did, but I think we need to take off the shackles and try and make the real tangible changes to the plan that's in front of us. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Jackson, I fully accept where you're coming from. Perhaps we do need to think outside the box, but then to think outside the box, we're going to have a discussion, so we'll have to have a roundtable discussion to think outside the box. I also now we have a proposal on the floor, but I see Pontius wishes to come back in, so I'm going to give him an opportunity here to come back in and maybe answer some of the questions.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I suppose maybe we're at the stage of proposals, but I just was wanted to come back on Councillor Jackson's, comments. Really that I see that the draft plan strategy we have before us is the best opportunity for us to take this forward and to, particularly at the local policies plan, we have the strategy here. That this is the best vehicle for us to actually identify additional land, primarily within the existing settlement, but also then, if it's not there, within the strategic land reserve. So I don't recognise, I suppose, that this draft plan strategy as we have it is a barrier. I think this is actually the opportunity, and the sooner we get the draft plan strategy and the local policies plan, this council will be able to actually identify land, additional land if necessary, to actually deliver the social housing. So but I suppose that's something probably we can discuss and tease out at a roundtable discussion. Thank you, Chair, for that opportunity.
Thank you, Pontius. Just before we go to the vote, well, from what I'm reading into it is that Philip has given his legal advice and said as well that even though we defer it here, it still will go forward to council. Am I correct in saying that, Philip?
Well, yes, Chair, it'll go forward to council with a recommendation to defer.
Thank you for that. Okay, we'll take a vote on that. All those in favour of deferring? Would you do a counter for the virtual, please?
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, we'll do the chamber first, Chair. Sorry, I didn't see. Thank you.
Okay, yeah.
Didn't see hands. Thanks. 2, 3. 5 in favour then, on chamber. Okay, virtually. Alderman Alan Breslin. Alan Breslin. Alderman Derek Hussey.
For.
Okay.
For
Alderman Keith Kerrigan.
Maura.
Okay. Councillor Jason Barr.
Or.
Okay. Councillor John Boyle.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Angela Robbins.
Maura.
Okay. Dan Kelly.
Maura.
Thank you. And I think that is, yeah, that's it. That's it, Chair. All for.
Okay, the vote is unanimous. Members, do we want to take a quick 10-minute break and start back in, or do we want to carry on?
I got a 5-minute break, even, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that, John. Okay, we'll recess 5 minutes. Thank you.
Alderman Hussey, Alderman Kerrigan,
Sorry, Eamon, I missed this bit now. This is the first I've heard you speaking there. Are we voting on something?
sorry, Chair.
Yes, we are indeed. We're voting on to adjourn, as the following papers that will be up for discussion would be relevant to the LDP, which has now been deferred.
Right. No, that's all right. It's just there's been no sound came through there for this last 5 minutes or so. I've heard nothing. So if you want to defer, I'm content to do that. That's all right. But again, I heard no conversation there for at least 5 minutes.
Is that a yes?
I'm content to go for deferment. Yes.
Sorry, member, we'll just take that. We'll try one more time. Alderman Breesland. Alderman Hussey,
Could you clarify what the vote is, please?
adjourn the meeting.
To adjourn the meeting. For.
Thank you. Alderman Kerrigan, you can just.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Jason Barr.
For.
Thank you. Councillor John Boyle.
Happy to adjourn, Chief. A date yet to be fixed, so yes, I'm for. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dobbins.
Happy with that. For.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kelly.
For Eamon.
Thank you, Councillor. That's everyone. So that's unanimous, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, unanimous decision for date to be set. Thank you. Bye.